Hello everyone, welcome. I am Shalini Pandey, Assistant Professor of English in Government TCL College, Janjgir. And in this today's session, we are going to discuss significance of the Porter scene in the play Macbeth. In your exams, questions comes like analyze the significance of the Porter scene in the play Macbeth, or write about the Porter scene in the play Macbeth, like that. So let's begin the discussion. Known in the theatres as a Scottish play, Macbeth was written by William Shakespeare probably around 1606 and published in 1623. So this play is also known as Scottish play. The Macbeth is also known as Scottish play. The third scene of the second act is popularly known as the Porter scene, where a drunken porter appears on the stage responding to the repeated knocking in the Macbeth castle. Shakespeare interrupted the flow of the play to dedicate a scene to drunken porter, the doorkeeper, just before the discovery of the King Duncan murder. The knocking continues, but the porter does not immediately open the door. He hallucinates. Instead, he plays a game with himself in which he imagines himself as the porter of the Hellgate and jokes about the kind of sinners he might let in. There are more sinners than sin. The porter of the Macbeth castle, drunk from the previous night's celebration, complains that his job is worse than that of the porter of the Hellgate, and in a private game with the audience, he engages in piece of stand-up comedy in which he imagines himself as that stressed out porter opening and closing door, and it is a moment of light comedy which serves to heighten the suspense of the play. It is not in any hurry He is not in any hurry to answer the door. He is imagining that at the door, farmer is there, then equivocator is there, and tailor is there. In reality, Macduff and Lennox are the door. Macduff and Lennox have come to take back King Duncan, so they are at the gate. See the picture, imaginary picture of Porter. Now he compares himself to the porter at the gate of hell and asks, "Who's there in the name of the Beelzebub?" Now he's swearing in the name of the Satan, Beelzebub. At the door are the Macduff and Lennox. Macduff good naturedly asks that what took him so long to open the door. The porter blames drunkenness and makes a series of jokes and alcohol and its effect on men. The porter provided moments of ionic comedy. Macbeth enters pretending to have just woken up. After this porter scene, Macduff asks if the king has woken yet. Duncan had asked to see Macduff early that morning. The porter scene obviously holds some meaning. Shakespeare had a purpose in writing the scene of porter scene to fill the time. He wanted to fill the time. He wanted to provide comic relief, but more importantly, as the way to give the audience a better understanding or how to play in the reality. The scene interrupts a dramatic string of events, and that would not normally be broken up. Otherwise, if there would have not been a porter scene. As the audience knows, Macbeth has just murdered King Duncan, and audience is on the stage of their seat to find out what would happen next. The interruptions allow for the suspense to build up while the actors prepare for what is going to next. Porter's scene in the Macbeth is strategically placed between the murder of the King Duncan and its discovery. The appearance and the words of the porter does take away much of the grim intensity, the grim atmosphere of the preceding scenes, but it is suddenly adds another elements of the play also. On the one hand, it provides a comic relief to some extent, and on the other hand, it serves a greater dramatic purpose. Many of the Shakespearean critics have tried to dismiss the Porter scene as a non-Shakespearean, that it has not been written by Shakespeare, but it has been written by some inferior hands. However, a close look at the episode disapproves such claims, and it proves the point that Shakespeare has written this scene only. The porter also functions thematically by indicating that the gate to the Macbeth home are synonymous to the gate of hell. It is interesting because the name Inverness, Macbeth castle name is Inverness, sound similar to the Inferno means hell. So Inferno means hell and Macbeth castle name is Inverness. So there is a quite similarity between both the names. And the way Lady Macbeth and Macbeth is behaving, they are behaving devilishly. So their castle has become second hell. He imagines sinners knocking at the hell gate. Porter imagines knocking sinners knocking at the hell gate. First, he imagines a farmer is knocking, then an educator or a lawyer is knocking, then finally an English tailor. So, in this way, he is imagining things, and Shakespeare borrows the Porter scene from the medieval harrowings of the Hell play, and like the Porter in those plays, this one is drunk, and the imaginary dead sinners whom he invites in all have a key aspects of their characters, which parallels flaw within Macbeth. So their flaws is parallel with the flaws of Macbeth, although Macbeth's sin is far greater. For example, the greedy farmer suggests Macbeth greed for greatness. The equivocator or lawyer refers to whom fair is fall, and Macbeth is certainly the master of the double talk. The tailor who enriched while stealing in the obvious reference to the Macbeth plotting and the stealing of the crown from the King Duncan. So now the porter also says that he has planned to accommodate more people had he not felt that the place was too cold for hell. These people whom he imagines to bring into hell belong to the ordinary level of society, committing petty sins. They are committing petty sins. Their sins are very small in front of Macbeth. Their sin is greediness, their sin is cheating, and Macbeth's sin is regicide. The farmer was greedy and hoarded his crop for better price, but lost everything and hanged himself. The equivocator misled justice by double-faced argument, by double talking, and the English tailor cheated the customer by using less garment to make a French hose of a tighter fitting than the English counterpart. So that English tailor has charged more money to make a less amount of means cloth which is made up of less amount of cloth and charging more money. So in this way he cheated his customers. And composed to these sins, compared to this sins, Macbeth killing King Duncan, that is regicide, is far more sinful and thousand times more devilish. On the other hand, all these petty sins such as greed, equivocation, double talking, ambiguous sentences, cheating are integral part of Macbeth's character also and his evil actions also. It is as if through these persons seeking admission, seeking entry, the porter is personifying the diverse fragments, the diverse elements of the Macbeth soul into the private hell. This is imagine picture. This is a large bonfire. It is imagine that in hell, this fire is continuously burning, and people have to live in that burning fire. The phrase primrose path to the everlasting bonfire is definitely very Shakespearean. In fact, this phrase is very keynote of the play. The story of Macbeth is a story of a journey towards damnation. Macbeth's royal accomplishments are only momentary. He is enjoying life for just for a moment for being king. The damnation is everlasting, and soon he will be damned. So, in this way, Porter is making prophecies. It could even be stated that Porter serves as a practically the third supernatural presence in the play, with the witches and the ghost of the Banco serving as the first two. So, according to the critics' view, the witches' presence is the first supernatural, then there is a Banco's ghost, then there is Porter presence is the third supernatural element in this play. Porter alarmingly heightens the diabolical mood that permits the play from the beginning. Although the impressions of the Porter tend to be just comical for modern audience, these series of religious references with the which could visibly arouse the picture of the mystery cycle on the audience minds cannot be missed. While considering the importance of the Porter's scene, the contemporary audience could also associate these images to the gunpowder plot, especially the part about equivocation. When the play was first performed in the early 1600s, technology was not so advanced as it is in today. Therefore, it would make sense that Shakespeare would add the Porter scene to make it easier for the actors to do any necessary costume change. Shakespeare has written this play for performance in the stage, not for publishing or not for a book reading. So, to give a rational space for the discharge of the certain actions, Cabell says, it gives Macbeth time to wash his hands, time to wash his bloody hands, and put the nightgown. And from the production perspective of drama, the Porter's scene offers Macbeth and Lady Macbeth the necessary time to change into nightgown because their cloth may have been bloody because they had killed King Duncan and washed Duncan's blood off themselves. So it provided that pause. Despite the mundane and the pseudo comic outburst, the Porter is able to keep the atmosphere gloomy and dismal and somehow serves as a dramatic bridge between the murder and the discovery. Shakespeare makes sure that there is a brief pause there is a small pause between the two scenes, strong scenes, so that the audience can get ready for the next rising. The intermittent knocking, there is continuous knocking going on. Why knocking is going on? Because because Porter is not opening the door. He's just hallucinating. He's just imagining things that he's imagining tailor, he's imagining farmer, and but he's not opening the door because he is so much drunk. He's heavily drunk, echoing the heartbeat of the audience. Uh, Helps to sustain the tension and yet achieve a mellowing down of the extreme excitement. The significance of the Porter within a scene within the Macbeth is a twofold. Primarily, the Porter function as a comic relief while lessening the tension of the audience following the murder of the King Duncan. And Shakespeare's tragedies generally contains comic scenes and characters to provide light relief for the audience. And Macbeth and the Macbeth Shakespeare shortest play. This is shortest play of Shakespeare, and one of the darkest play also. Has a very little comedy and only one purely comic character is a Porter. The Porter main function is to come between two of the most intense, harrowing scenes in the play: the murder of the Duncan and the discovery of that murder, interposing his common humor and down-to-earth persona. He is a very humble person. He is just a Porter to make the peak of the high tragedy stand out by contrast. The apparently disjointed, discordant, and the drunken statement of the Porter is sometimes criticized as a not written by Shakespeare. And this low soliloquy, Justice College regarded as the counterfeit and vehemently asserted was written for the mob by some other hands, probably with the Shakespeare approval only, and was composed by mob. So, and they have suggested something like and many critics lead by Coleridge complains that the speeches of the Porter are out of place here and austere atmosphere of the place. And the Coleridge writes, and I quote, the low soliloquy of the Porter and his few speeches afterwards, I believe to have been written by the mob by some other hands, perhaps with the Shakespeare consent only, and I unquote. These critics think that the Potter scene is strangely out of the place amidst the tragic horrors which surrounded it, and it quite different in its effect from the comic passages which Shakespeare had introduced into other tragedies. So there are other critics also, and who are of the view that a scene is important to this play, and it prevent the emotional cramp from the resetting in, because it is too persistent dark atmosphere of the play otherwise. So even those who acknowledge that Shakespeare wrote it would argue that he was forced to include such a trifling details in order to appease the common audience need for sensationalism and grossness. So they think that Shakespeare just catered to that sensationalism. Others would view that incident as the unfortunate necessity due to the circumstances. There is yet other who would justify the Potter's scene on the ground that this scene provided dramatic need of comic relief. But D. Quincy, another critic, finds the scene all Shakespearean, but denies the part of the comic relief. In fact, it is his view identifies to the tragic impact of the play. He believes that it is all Shakespearean, and the other is a Macbeth, a brave warriors, and in fact, in this view, he intensified the tragic impact in the play. He believes that the both Lady Macbeth formed as the image of the devils. The next world is getting prepared for this message. In this intermittent period, the Potter appears in the scene like the great artistic skill. There is a Hellgate compared to the Macbeth castle. The other is Macbeth, brave warrior who speaks poetry while still being a killer. The first is a tipsy, is a drunkard, tipsy, tip seeking, menial and foul language and dirty jokes. As a result, the comparison between the Potter and his master, that is Macbeth, is also mad. The imagination of the Potter is also the hell minus tragic pangs, but the continuation of the tragic suspense. Anyway, the Potter also provides some continuity of the subject matter by likening Macbeth's castle to the hell, wearing the topical references and the vulgar descriptions of the drunkenness and its effect with the more fantastical supernatural material. So, thank you for listening to me, and please like, subscribe my channel. Thank you so much.